I let out a small sigh as I sat with my hands folded across my lap as I allowed my mother fuss over the last-minute changes to my makeup. "Mom," I said firmly, giving her a firm look. "I'm ready, stop fussing, you're making me nervous with it." My mother stepped back taking a calming breath before making minute adjustments to the white wedding dress I was wearing. "Mom," I said again, shaking my head. "Please." "You're right," she breathed again as she stepped back. "How are you feeling?" "I'm good," I assured honestly as my hand drifted to my slightly swollen stomach, my pregnancy finally starting to show itself 3 months in. "I'm as ready as I'll ever be." My mother smiled at me as she smoothed out her own dress, allowing me to look at myself in the mirror in the room. Honestly, if I didn't know it was May, would have had a hard time recognizing myself in the reflection. Artfully done makeup removed any possible blemish from my face, my lips were painted a deep red color, my eyes somehow stood out with the eyeliner surrounding them. In addition, my hair had been carefully combed and styled into ringlets that were pulled over both of my shoulders, allowing them to fall down my front, contrasting the white sleeveless dress I wore. A knock on the door brought our attention to it as Sarutobi-sama stepped in, decked out in his full Hokage regalia. "It's time," he told me with a small smile, getting one from me in return as I smoothly got to my feet, accepting the bouquet my mother handed me. "Well, time to face the crowd then I guess," I commented dryly, getting chuckles from the two as I slid my hand into the crook to Sarutobi-sama's elbow. I am honestly surprised at how calm I am right now. Was Gamer's Mind the reason for it? Oh well. Music started playing as soon as we stepped into the main hall where the ceremony was being held. Keeping my head bowed slightly, my eyes darted across the crowd, noting the various clan heads of both Konoha and Iwa in attendance along with the Tsuchikage. This was the first recorded marriage between the villages after all, and a clan head to a Jinchuriki no less. My eyes finally settled on Rashi, clad in a tuxedo with Hansen at his side standing at the front of the hall, and the world seemed to fade away. Honestly, I can't really say I remembered much of the ceremony. I remembered meeting eyes with an honestly stunned-looking Rashi as he looked at me as the monk from the fire temple began to speak. I remember reciting our vows to one another, our oaths to always stand by and support each other no matter what. And then, the kiss. Physically, it wasn't anything special. Symbolically, on the other hand, it was the start of our new lives. Hell, afterwards some of the newspapers heralded it as the real start for the alliance between Konoha and Iwa, some of the less reputable papers stating that I used my Sharingan to convince Rashi to marry me. I just ignored them like so many others did. The reception was an interesting event in the end, Hansen providing a rather embarrassing story about the two of them when they were younger and talking about marriage of all things. Both of the Kages present also stood and gave, thankfully, short speeches about the union. I have had the pleasure of seeing many shinobi careers progress, some exceeding all expectations while others were cut woefully short, Sarutobi-sama announced as he stood up to speak, the crowd paying attention. And Yuriko Uchiha's was one that had the attention of many since her first day in the war, an Irionin to equal Tsunade's skill, even if she is too humble to believe it. He smiled at me as I tried to hide my blush. And every time that I speak with her, I am always left struck by the strength she carries within herself as a kunoichi of Konohagakure. She has seen the death of her family members, of her loved ones, of people she could never replace, and all it has served to do is to make her more determined than ever to protect the people that remain. So I say this to you, Yuriko Uchiha, I look forward to seeing your, hopefully, long and bright future. I smiling brightly at him, fighting back a few tears as he raised his cup to me, nodding my head in acknowledgement as he took his seat with Inoki raising himself into the air with his earth release, lightweight rock, jutsu. I will admit, when I first met Yuriko, I was not in the best of moods, Inoki announced, garnering chuckles from everyone. And I probably didn't make the best first impression by threatening her, but, to her credit, she gave as good as she got, and that was when I first gained some respect for her. The following years, and several idiots removed from the gene pool, that respect had been reinforced because with every letter she wrote, instead of spitting accusations and threats, she was without fail, polite. Never assuming the worst, but simply accepting what had happened. I quite honestly doubt that I will ever meet another kunoichi like her. He gave me a nod, grinning a bit at my wide-eyed expression of surprise. As for Rashi, while many would see him marrying into Konohagakure as a loss, I do not. I see it as a strengthening, as a promise. Because of our new union, and of the union before us now, Konoha and Iwa are united strongly, and while one of our finest and most underrated shinobi may have left the village, he has done so in a way that ensures we have an ally to call upon when we have need of them, as we will aid them. So I salute the new couple, and the union of our once enemy villages. May this be the precursor to a new age of peace. The crowd applauded the diminutive Kage's speech, joined by myself and Rashi as the servers took that as their cue to bring out the meal for the evening, allowing us all to break out into conversations with our tables. The night was a fun one, dancing with Rashi, the two Kage, Rashi even managing to convince Han-san to step out into the floor. I made sure that the photographer for the entire thing got a picture of Naruto-kun dancing with Hinata-chan, the two of them blushing a bit in embarrassment at the attention I gave them. I remember Chika-chan catching the bouquet I threw out into the crowd before Rashi escorted me away with our honor guard to the Uchiha building for our night, Naruto-kun and Sasuke-kun both staying the night at the Hyuga compound to give us some time together. The night itself was different. There was a feeling to it like I hadn't felt before with Rashi. Maybe it was the fact that we were now husband and wife, maybe it was just the charge from the wedding, maybe it was just coincidence, but that night was a night I would always remember with my husband. All I knew, that at that moment, I didn't care about the changes that I was making, I didn't care about what the future would hold, I just simply embraced my husband and enjoyed the moment for what it was. Okay, since my reincarnation, I have been stabbed, electrocuted, burnt, attacked by killer rabbits, had my bones broken more than once, and in general, I thought I had known pain. Giving birth trumped all off that. The scream that tore through my throat as I tried to push my child out of me was loud enough that Rashi was wincing from more than just me crushing his hand with mine. And this had been going on for 2 hours now, not including the rush to the hospital that happened 12 hours ago when my water broke, nor does it count the 12 hours of enduring contractions as my body prepared itself for birth. I could honestly say, this is the worst pain I ever experienced, and I am a Kamidam Kunoichi. Keep pushing. Sayataicho shouted encouragingly. Honestly, she was about one of the only women I would trust down there with my child when I'm giving birth. I can see the head, the baby's coming out now. Sucking in a lungful of air, I gritted my teeth as I squeezed my husband's hand even harder as I did my best to follow her instructions. Damn it, I hope this child understands just how much this freaking hurts. I shouted as I pushed my child out of my body before giving Rashi a glare with what was no doubt my eternal Manjikyu Sharingan from the flinch he gave. And if you dare to tell me to start breathing deeply, I will crush your balls and see how well you breathe. Rashi nodded, quickly signaling that he understood what he was saying. Yes, dear, he replied quickly, a bit wide-eyed in response. Smart man. Don't worry, honey, you're doing fine, my mother told me from where she was assisting Sayataicho. The head is coming out now. Sucking in another lungful, I ignored a fresh wave of agonizing pain to instead grit my teeth and push again with my full might as the doctors assisted by gently pulling the child out. The baby is out. Saya-sensei announced as wails were heard. It's a girl. I gasped for air, feeling weaker than any other point in my life beforehand, as they cleaned my baby girl from the placenta covering her and quickly wrapped her in a soft pink blanket before handing her off to me. I mustered up enough strength to hold my daughter in my arms as she was placed there by Sayataicho, allowing me to look down at her as she began to calm a bit. Her hair was red, a shade darker than Rashi's own with coal-black eyes as she weakly opened them up to see me and Rashi. A pair of small white scars rested above her eyes, in the same place Goku-san had his eye ridges, no doubt the mark of her father's status as a Jinchuriki. Oh, she's got your nose, I commented, a sob of joy welling up within me as we looked down at our daughter in awe. Your eyes though, which is probably a good thing, Rashi breathed into my ear, placing an arm around my shoulders. She's gorgeous. Nei-chan. Naruto-kun called out nervous, getting my attention to the door where he looked in nervously with Sasuke-kun, Han-san peeking in with a raised eyebrow. Come in, you too, met your niece, I told my adopted little brothers, sharing a knowing look with Rashi who nodded as the two rushed over to climb up onto my bed to get a better look. Meet Madoka-chan, I told them as my daughter turned her gaze to the two faces entering her faces with a gurgle. Madoka-chan, these are your uncles, Naruto-kun and Sasuke-kun, they will be helping protect you from now on. Naruto-kun nodded eagerly, making sure not to let out his usual exuberant shouts when he was excited. We had been very clear that it would upset the baby, as Sasuke-kun nodded in agreement, his face looking rather shocked. Also, the big guy in the back, he's your godfather, Han-san, I continued, smiling at the nervous-looking Jinchuriki. Seriously, had enough power to take on an army by himself, and he was petrified about being a godfather. It was funny in its own way. Don't worry, he only looks scary, he's a big softy at heart. A click was heard, making us look over to our mother who had just taken a picture of all of us, with a warm smile that I returned to her. I had my family around me, my husband beside me, and my daughter in my arms, all was right in the world. Thank God I had experience with raising Naruto-kun, if I didn't I would have been completely at a loss and overwhelmed by little Madoka-chan. Rashi himself had been at a complete loss with how to care for a child, making me chuckle in amusement as I showed him how to change diapers and burp Madoka-chan properly. Thankfully, I wasn't alone in raising her. Rashi was putting everything he could into raising her. My mother doted on her granddaughter and was more than willing to babysit when we were pulled away for missions. Apparently, even though the daimyo sent me a nice congratulatory letter for my newborn, he still wanted me to do missions. Thankfully, my responsibilities had lessened beforehand, with me delegating most of my non-critical paperwork to one of the other surviving Jonin Uchiha. A couple of the Chunin had been promoted themselves over the last few years. Little Madoka-chan took up a lot of attention as she grew, loving the attention everyone gave her, especially that of her uncles who seemed to hover over her in wonder and a wish to protect her. Madoka-chan squealed happily as I picked her up from her playpen as I finally finished my paperwork for the day, catching up from the mission I had been on with Rashi last week. Well, aren't you a happy one today, Madoka-chan? I cheered at her happily as picked her up. My daughter squealed happily as she smiled at me, gabbing away in her formless words. I giggled as I placed her on my hip and walked out of my office into the main apartment, the boys away at the academy while Rashi was assisting some of the genin with their fire manipulation training. A knock on the window brought my attention to the window where a cat-masked ANBU was standing. Hokage-sama requests your presence, Yuriko-sama, the ANBU informed before vanishing with a body flicker, making me sigh as I looked down at Madoka-chan. Well, want to visit Gigi? I asked her, getting baby babble in return. Unfortunately, my mother was busy at the hospital and the usual mothers had their own hands full. Grabbing her baby bag, I stepped out of the house and began making my way to the Hokage's tower, the path very familiar for me by now as I walked through the streets, politely excusing myself from conversation with the assorted mothers and grandmothers who greeted me. Hokage-sama is waiting for you, Uchiha-sama, the secretary informed me as I strode in, garnering a nod from me in return. Thank you, Retsu-san, I replied, smiling at her briefly before stepping into the office. You called for me, Hokage-sama. Indeed, thank you for coming so promptly. Sarutobi-sama greeted with a fond smile as Madoka-chan babbled happily at him. Hello to you as well, Madoka-chan, he said cheerfully to my daughter. He really was a grandfather to everyone in Konoha. He had even kept an eye on her when I got rushed into an A-rank mission for the daimyo at extremely short notice and none of my usual babysitters were available. I just wanted to inform you about some of the movements we've secured about Itachi, Sarutobi-sama informed seriously. He was recently spotted in Tsuchi no Kuni in the company of Kisame Hashigaki wearing black cloaks with red clouds. It seems he's joined an organization of some kind. My eyes narrowed in response, ice filling my voice as I spoke. Do we know anything about the organization? I questioned him, Madoka-chan squirming a bit in response to the anger radiating off me, making me bounce her a bit in comfort. This is an S-class secret for the time being, Sarutobi-sama replied firmly. And we are only informing you because of your connection to the organization's goals. They are called the Akatsuki, and the only goal we have been able to find out so far is hunting down and acquiring the Jinchuriki of the 9 Bijou. A growl ripped from my throat. So, the clan wasn't enough for him? I muttered angrily, getting a strange look from Sarutobi-sama. Because of this, I have pulled Kakashi from ANBU and I am going to have him assigned as Naruto-kun's Jonin sensei, Sarutobi-sama informed me. My lips thinned in response. Are you sure you can trust the coward with it? I snarled, unable to stop the words from coming out. Chances are he'll just run off when Naruto-kun needs him the most again. Sarutobi-sama winced a bit at the words I spoke. You weren't exactly in the best state afterwards yourself, Yuriko-chan, he replied, garnering a shamed wince from myself. I know that you have, opinion-sun his actions after the death of Minato and Kushina, but he watched over Naruto-kun in his own way. I looked away, my face heating up with some shame. I don't remember him being there when Naruto-kun was teething. I don't remember him being there when Naruto-kun was getting teased by some of the older students for his chakra control issues. I don't remember him being there when I was trying to comfort Naruto-kun when I was still grieving for Sakaki and Ai-san. I knew my voice was shaking, but I didn't care as I ranted. So if he was watching, then where was he when Naruto-kun had tripped while training, cutting his hand with the kunai he was training with? If he was watching, where was he when Naruto-kun was learning how to control the Kyuubi's chakra from Rashi and Han-san? Sarutobi-sama gave me a knowing look as he seemed to look even older before me. Yuriko-chan, he spoke, cutting through the anger I was feeling. Kakashi was just as lost as you were after Minato and Kushina's death. unfortunately we weren't able to give him the support he needed, and he would not have been equipped at all to raise Naruto-kun. I allowed him to enter ANBU because that was the only place he could recover. I looked down at Madoka-chan as she began to play with my hair, looking like she adjusted to the heavy atmosphere the conversation was created. "I'm sorry, Sarutobi-sama," I whispered with a small frown as I gently ran a finger along her cheek. "It's just. You are only human," Sarutobi-sama assured me with a calm smile. "Yuriko-chan, I know how you feel, but please remember, he is going to be there to protect Naruto-kun." I let out a small sigh and nodded. "Of course, Sarutobi-sama," I replied. "I will keep your words in mind." "That is all I ask for, Yuriko-chan," Sarutobi-sama assured me with a small smile. "Now, you mind if I spend some time with Madoka-chan as well?" I couldn't help the smile that came over my face as I chuckled. "Of course I don't mind," I assured him as I stepped forward, allowing him to take the now happily gurgling Madoka-chan from my arms. I watched with a worried look as Rashi and Naruto-kun were meditating in a clearing of the Blackwood Forest, keeping an eye out for any of the chakra mutations that would try and attack them. The pair were currently within their minds, speaking with their Bijou, Rashi and Goku-san trying to help Naruto-kun with convincing the Kyuubi to share his chakra with him. I twitched minutely as a new chakra signature entered the field and made its way towards us. Glancing over I spotted a head of silver hair as Kakashi strode forward, his face unreadable under the half-face mask and only one visible eye. "Hataki-san," I greeted neutrally as he entered the clearing. Hataki-san blinked as he looked over at me with a lazy look, his entire body stiff. "Uchiha-san," he replied back, nodding ever so slightly. "What are they doing?" "Communing with their Bijou," I replied evenly. "Rashi and Goku-san are trying to convince the Kyuubi to lend him some chakra." "Ah, so we are trusting an IWA shinobi for this?" he questioned. "We are trusting an ally and now Konohagakure shinobi for this, yes," I shot back coldly, glaring at him briefly. I knew why he was suspicious and distrustful of IWA shinobi. It had been a trap by them that had killed one Obito Uchiha. Regardless of that, there was no way in hell I was going to let him imply treachery on the part of my husband and my child's godfather. Hataki-san stared back at me blankly as I met his stare for several moments before shrugging carelessly. "Well, I suppose you would trust others to do the hard work," he said bluntly. "After all, it didn't turn out all that well the last time you were supposed to guard someone." My eyes narrowed as my hand twitched at the reminder of the night of Naruto-kun's birth. "Well, at least I didn't abandon the child of my mentor to run and hide," I shot back, my voice growing even colder. Hataki-san twitched in response as he turned a cyclopean glare on me. "Considering that you failed to protect the people you care for, I don't need to hear that from you," Hataki-san growled in response. I knew my Sharingan flared to life as I glared at him in response, my jaw tightening. "Better than your track record, at least I was there to try," I snapped at him, anger coloring my tone. A larger twitch spasmed Hataki-san's hand as his eye narrowed. "I am honestly surprised Naruto didn't die under your watch considering how everyone else ended up," he snarled angrily. Crack. I didn't care if it could be considered insubordination, but it felt good to punch him across the face at his words. "Watch yourself, Hataki," I growled as he staggered back from the strike. "My patience has its own limits, and you are pushing them severely." Hataki snorted as he rubbed his covered jaw, "No doubt it would have an impressive bruise in the morning. And the fact that you just attacked your superior won't help you," he said in a smug manner. "Superior? Hardly," I replied with narrowed eyes. "We're the same rank, Hataki-san. You may be the overly vaunted hero of the Sharingan, but I am the equal of the clan killer. In my opinion you're just wasting me cousin's eye." Kakashi's eye widened and I barely managed to block his strike with my active Sharingan as he glared furiously at me. "You dare," he snarled angrily. "I do," I snarled back, equally angry. "I wonder what he would think of your decision to abandon Minato-sama's son after he died. What is it that he vaunted all the time? Those who abandon their mission are trash, but those that abandon their comrades are worse than trash. What would that make you then, Hataki?" He let out a strangled shout of rage as he struck at me again with his opposite hand that I barely leaned out of the way of only for him to headbutt me on the bridge of my nose, pain searing through me as it broke under his hitayate. I stepped away, my hand reached up, alight with green chakra to fix the damage as Hataki reached up and pushed his hitayate up to reveal his three-tomo Sharingan. "You're really going to try and use my cousin's eye against me, Hataki?" I questioned tauntingly as I fixed my nose, my own Sharingan spinning. How arrogant can you get, Hataki? No one with an implanted Sharingan can defeat an Uchiha with it. Kakashi snarled in response as he began forming hand seals, my own hands coming up to mimic his seals. You. What's wrong? Don't like someone stealing your shtick? I asked tauntingly, a smirk coming onto my face as we continued to form the seals. You really think you're the only one to use this trick against people? Hataki snarled as we finished forming the seals, about to release it before something stepped between us, cloaked in magma red chakra as we were suddenly pushed away from one another. Enough! Rashi roared with his Bija chakra enhanced voice. You are both allies, why the fuck are you fighting to kill? I blinked several times as I shook my head in disorientation, my husband's words feeling like someone dumped cold water down my back. Damn it. I grunted, shaking my head. You're right. Rashi. I looked off to the side to see Naruto-kun looking between the two of us in worried concern. Ne-chan, he called out questioningly, making me slump a bit as I sighed, running my hand along my face as my Sharingan faded. It's alright Naruto-kun, we were just having an argument that got out of hand, I admitted, smilingly comfortingly at him. Isn't that right, Hataki-san? Ah, yeah, Hataki-san agreed sheepishly, seeming like he also realized what had been about to happen between the two of us. Thank you for stopping us. Rashi-san. Rashi nodded as his lava release, chakra mode, faded. No worries, he replied, sending a look between the two of us. Just be glad Kurama pointed out what was happening while we were conversing with him. Kurama? I questioned, remembering that I wasn't supposed to know the Kyuubi's name. Is that the Kyuubi? Yeah. Naruto-kun confirmed with an eager nod. He was really grumpy at first, but he seemed to calm down after Goku-san talked with him for a bit. He's being really stingy with his chakra though, won't let me do anything cool like Rashi and I and Hana and I can do with their partners. I smiled at him warmly as I jumped down and patted his sunny blonde hair affectionately. Don't worry too much about it, I told him softly. It Ishi's chakra after all, he will only share it when he wants to, kinda like how you and Sasuke-kun share your toys. Naruto-kun screwed his face up in an adorable manner as he thought about it before nodding. Then I have to be friends with him in order for him to share, he asked for confirmation, getting a nod in response from me. Exactly, I confirmed with a giggle. If anyone can befriend him, then it's you, Naruto-kun. My little brother smiled brightly at me before hugging me tightly in response. I'll make you proud, Ne-san, he told me confidently. I always am, I assured him with a smile as I stroked his head gently. Now, let me introduce you to Kakashi Hataki-san, he is an acquaintance of mine. Naruto-kun looked over to the silver-haired man who had recovered his poise and covered up Obito's Sharingan. Why were you two fighting? He asked, looking up at me suspiciously, before glancing at Hataki-san with the same suspicion. Ah. I think that may be my fault, Hataki-san admitted. I mentioned some things that were sore points for your sister. Unfortunately, I didn't help it very much either, I pitched in, owning up to my own responsibility with the situation. But I think we have gotten out of our systems now, I looked over to Hataki-san with a raised eyebrow. I think so as well, Hataki-san nodded in agreement. It won't be happening again. Well, alright then, Naruto-kun nodded in agreement as he stepped away and looked up at Hataki-san with a bright smile. Nice to meet you. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. A flash of a deep pain flashed through Hataki-san's eyes briefly before he covered it with an eye smile. It is nice to meet you, Naruto-kun, he replied cheerfully, a cheer that was only a little forced. I've heard some good things about you. I smiled as Naruto-kun chatted with Hataki-san, looking over as Rashi stepped up next to me and slid his arm around my waist, allowing me to lean against him a bit. It was rough for me to look at Hataki-san and see the reminder of my own failures, but, for Naruto-kun, I think the two of us could get along. Damn it. Naruto-kun cursed as he tried again to create an illusionary clone only for it to come out looking rather weak and feeble. Why can't I get this right? I smiled encouragingly at him. Well, I guess that means you're just not that good with fine chakra control, I told him comfortingly. I'll try asking Sarutobi-sama if he knows any other clone techniques you can learn. Naruto-kun pouted a bit in response. But I don't want to disappoint you with not being able to learn your techniques. He admitted reluctantly, not meeting my eyes. Naruto-kun, you would never disappoint me, I saw you putting in your every effort to learn everything I tried to teach you, I assured him. Even if you can't learn my techniques, that just means you must create your own. Naruto-kun blushed a bit before nodding. Then I'll make the best damn jutsu you will ever see, he declared proudly, making me smile cheerfully at him. I know you will, I assured him with a chuckle. How about you work on splitting the leaf for now while I help the others with their training? Naruto-kun nodded eagerly before running over to one of the trees in the Uchiha training ground and running up it to grab a leaf to do his wind nature manipulation training. Looking away, I grinned at Sasuke, who was working on igniting a leaf with his fire chakra, managing to get some wisps of smoke emanating for it. My eyes came to a rest on the pink hair of Sakura as she walked into the training field. Ah, good morning, Sakura-chan, I greeted her cheerfully, getting a somewhat nervous smile from her. Ready to continue your training? Yes, Yuriko-sensei, Sakura-chan confirmed, her face becoming determined. What are we working on today? I smirked at her a bit before tossing her a wooden kodachi. Self-defense, I told her firmly. Being able to heal your allies is all well and good, but it is of no use if they are getting killed by nearby enemies while you are trying to avoid getting hurt. Sakura-chan stared at the wooden blade in her hand for several moments before meeting my firm gaze with a small gulp. Letting out a firm breath, she settled herself and tried to mimic my stance. Humming, I looked her over carefully, making adjustments to her stance, changing her grasp minutely. Alright, step and swing, maintaining the stance, I instructed, watching her carefully. Once you have swung, step back into the proper stance. I made a slow slash of my own, giving her an example as to what it should look like. Don't worry about doing it quickly at first, take your time, and you will gradually speed up a bit, I told her gently. Don't worry about messing up, I'm not expecting perfection. Sakura-chan nodded before following my orders. What about Tsunade-sama's rules for Irionin to avoid fighting? She questioned nervously, slowly going through the motions of the slash. Do you know how many actually listen to that? I questioned dryly. Irionin developed their own fighting style for a reason. While I will always defer to Tsunade with medical matters, many of us refuse to allow our skills as shinobi falter simply because we wish to heal our comrades. Sometimes, however, the only way we can save lives is to take them. Sakura-chan swallowed tightly at my admission. So, you don't follow the rules. But, aren't they the, well, rules? She asked nervously. I snorted in response. They are not the ironclad rules of the Irionin, I told her firmly. While I admit many do join the medical corps because they dislike fighting, but still wish to aid their comrades, but, like with two different taijutsu masters of differing styles, every Irionin is different. The best example would be myself and Tsunade. I am fully dedicated to being a combat medic, I will fight beside my comrades to ensure their health. Tsunade is a support medic, she fights at the rear lines, dealing with the serious injuries that US frontliners can't deal with without distracting us from dangerous enemies. What are you training me to be? Sakura-chan asked me with nervous eyes. Whatever you want to be, I told her firmly. You could follow Tsunade's support role, my own frontline role, or even create your own role. All I am doing is giving you the skills you will need to succeed while being able to defend yourself. Sakura-chan relaxed slightly as she continued to swing the wooden kodachi. I see, she vocalized. If you don't mind me asking, why does it sound like you don't like Tsunade-sama? I blinked in surprise as I realized she had picked up on my own feelings from talking about Tsunade's rules. That is a personal reason, I told her reassuringly. I disagree with her on a professional level because of how she tries to heavy-hand her own method as what all Irionin should be. I shook my head at the thought. In my opinion, that would lead to stagnation in the medical field in general. Because we would all be following the exact same method and those who have difficulty with it would be left behind? Sakura theorized, getting a grin from me. Exactly, I confirmed with a proud nod. Myself, I could never just stand back when everyone is fighting on the front lines, so if we were all to be following only Tsunade's method, I would never succeed as an Irionin. So you don't follow the rules so that you can flourish with your own skills, Sakura said, speaking more to herself than to me. I smiled a bit as she continued to work on the form with the wooden kodachi I gave her, idly wondering if this is how my brother had felt when he was teaching me. Shaking my head, I turned to Sasuke-kun, who looked like he was struggling a bit with the fire manipulation training. Sasuke-kun, you won't be able to ignite the leaf like that, I told him gently as he tossed a dried-out leaf away. You have to convert the chakra before you push it into the leaf. Sasuke-kun gave a grunt of frustration to tell me he heard me as he began trying to do as I said, making me smile a bit. It always surprised me, despite their initial appearances it was Sasuke-kun was the impatient one while Naruto-kun, who could barely sit still when doing nothing, who could intently focus on his training without pause. My cousin was impatient when it came to learning new techniques and quickly became frustrated when he wasn't able to get it right away. I suppose that would come when you spent much of your younger life idolizing your genius older brother, especially so when that brother turns traitor and some idiots looked at him as if he would repeat Itachi's actions. Fucking idiots. Still, I made sure to get his head cleared when his frustration got to be too much or when his anger spiked too much. I will never allow Itachi to sink his stupid thoughts into Sasuke-kun's head, that twisted idea to make him stronger by making him suffer. I will crush it underfoot while providing my little brother stability and family so that he will always have something to return home to. And fuck anyone who tries to take my family from me. Because they will find themselves facing me, and I will not go easy on any of them, no matter what their reason is, even if it was to save the world. Danzo had found that out the hard way. I looked away from Sasuke and out to Konohagakure proper, my eyes narrowing a bit. It was like Sarutobi-sama said, Konoha is the family for all Konoha shinobi, so for Konoha I would become a monster that others fear, so that my family is safe. Turning away, I smiled down at Sasuke-kun who was looking up at me with a frustrated pout and put those thoughts out of my mind for the time being. Right now, the monster that is Konoha's bloody scalpel wasn't needed, all that is needed is Yuriko Uchiha. Times of peace like this, I can be myself. You have a mission for me, Sarutobi-sama? I asked the elderly Hokage of the Hidden Leaf as I stood before him. It was pretty obvious he wanted me to deploy on a mission since he told me to leave Madoka-chan with Rashi. I do, Sarutobi-sama nodded in confirmation, giving me a severe look. How aware are you of the situation in Kiri right now? Just that they are undergoing a civil war based on the bloodline purges, I admitted with a shrug. While Kirigakure was trying to keep that knowledge hidden, the fact that they refused to host the Chunin exams, only sent out a single team to any exam, a team that didn't have any Kekkei Genkai users on it, and that they hadn't taken on any missions for a long period of time, spelt it out pretty clearly. And that by this point they are pretty much bankrupt from the lack of missions they're doing. Indeed, and I have just received word from the team scouring Roots records, that the rebel faction has been trying to get a hold of me for some time now, Sarutobi-sama revealed, getting a raised eyebrow from myself. Danzo thought that Kiri was better off in the mess of the civil war they are in the midst of right now, refusing to look at the long term on what should happen should the Mizukage actually succeed in his purge of Kekkei Genkai users. He would see himself as correct, and look outside of Kirigakure to continue his purge, and with us having the large collection of Kekkei Genkai users in the elemental nations, we would doubtless be targeted next. What do you plan on doing, Sarutobi-sama? I asked him curiously. Well, I will be meeting with the leader of the rebels in Nami no Kuni along with Inoki who has expressed interest in seeing the war in Kiri end before it spreads further, Sarutobi-sama explained calmly. You will be my escort for this meeting. Of course, Sarutobi-sama, I replied, bowing a bit in response to his order. When do we leave? In an hour, Sarutobi-sama announced, garnering a blink from me. This is being kept top secret, that explained it. So tell no one where we are going and why. Meet me at the eastern sub-gate when you have your gear. I gave him a quick salute in response. Yes, Hokage-sama. I confirmed before vanishing out of his opened window with a quick, Inaba flicker, as a pop-up window appeared before me. Mandatory quest. Give aid to the Kirigakure Bloodline Rebellion objective. Ensure the rebels emerge victorious against the loyalists. Reward plus 50,000 EXP, plus 15,000 reputation with the reformed Kirigakure, 1 million Rio bonus objective. Reward. Been a while since I've seen a mandatory quest like this. Then again, I had been rather busy with my family. Closing the notification window, I rushed across the rooftops with only the rushing of displaced air indicating my passage as I made my way to my home. Landing on my porch, I entered into the living room to find Rashi watching the TV with Madoka-chan snoozing on his chest. Mission? He asked, seeing the serious look on my face. Yeah, might be a long one too, I replied, giving him an apologetic smile before kissing him fondly and brushing my lips across Madoka-chan's deep red hair. Give my love to Naruto-kun and Sasuke-kun when they get back. Of course, and I will let Suzuha know that you're going to be away for an undetermined amount of time, Rashi assured with a chuckle, standing up very carefully so that Madoka-chan wouldn't wake up. She can take care of most of the paperwork. If I remember correctly, there shouldn't be anything major coming up, correct? I paused in thought for a moment. Aishi-kun is graduating from the academy next week, I said as I moved through the small armory we had set up in the house, with several seals on the door to keep Madoka-chan from getting in, collecting my assorted gear and strapping my kodachi to my leg. Well, if he actually studies for the written test he will anyways. Rashi chuckled in amusement. I think his mother will be on his case for that, he assured me as I began checking my Fuinjutsu supplies. Your mother and Suzuha can keep the clan going while you're away. I smiled softly at him as I placed my supplies into a scroll and slid it into my equipment pouch. Thank you, I said gratefully, kissing him again, the arm that wasn't holding Madoka-chan wrapped around my shoulder and held me in a gentle embrace as we kissed. I love you, I whispered quietly to him after our lips parted. His bearded face split into a grin in response. I love you too, he replied, kissing me again briefly before stepping away to allow me to continue to get ready. Come home safe, he told me as I pulled on my now signature jacket. Always, I assured, smiling brightly at him before leaping off towards the subgate that I was to meet Sarutobi-sama at. Our arrival at Nami no Kuni was rather quiet, to be honest, which really wasn't a surprise, since we were both high-level shinobi who didn't want to be seen in the country, and quite simply no one did see our arrival until we met up with the Tsuchikage and, surprisingly, Han-san. Getting slow in your old age, Sarutobi? Inoki questioned teasingly as he floated beside Sarutobi-sama. Hardly, I just enjoy viewing the scenery, my leader replied easily as Han-san and I clasped hands in greeting. Hello, Han-san, how have you been? I greeted politely as our leaders began to converse with one another. Good, actually, Han-san informed, sounding rather content. Things have been improving in Iwagakure since the alliance, and your marriage. How are Rashi and Madoka doing? I smiled at my daughter's godfather warmly. They've been great, I assured him. Madoka-chan loves that stuffed doll of Kokuo you sent, can't go to sleep without it. Despite his face being covered, it was obvious the Jinchuriki was happily relieved that his gift had been well received. Good, the woman who made it was rather surprised at my request, actually, he admitted with a small cough as he looked away, drawing a giggle out of me at his bashfulness. And Naruto? How has his training been? I know he was still trying to get Kurama to open up when I returned to IWA. Well, he's gotten Kurama to speak with him a bit, I said, rolling my shoulders a bit as I frowned. Apparently their conversations are lasting longer every time they speak, so, I don't know how long until he can safely access Kurama's chakra, or if he will let Naruto-kun safely access his chakra. Han-san nodded his understanding. From what Kokuo was saying, Kurama is rather obstinate, he commented with a sigh. But, I suppose if anyone could, it would be Naruto, kid could make friends with a shark. Laughter bubbled up from within at the Jinchuriki's statement as my shoulders shook. Fair enough, I replied mirthfully, grinning at him cheerfully before my active Sharingan caught some nearby movement. Company, I murmured to him, my hand twitching, the stiffening of Sarutobi-sama's shoulders and the narrowing of Inoki's eyes told me they caught my signal. All of our heads turned to the tree line as a pair made their way out of the trees and made their way towards us, Meitarumi taking the lead in her signature blue dress and her long russet red hair pulled into a ponytail. Next to her was Ao with his blue and black outfit and eye patch covering his implanted Byakugan and the talismans he uses to protect the eye hanging from his ears. Hokage-sama and Tsuchikage-sama, I must admit I am surprised by your presence here, Mei announced, blinking in surprise at the sight of the Tsuchikage and Han-san. I had heard of your alliance, but I didn't think you would be here as well. Considering how the brat that's wearing the Kage hat in your country is acting, I would rather nip this in the bud before it becomes too dangerous, Inoki commented wryly in response, looking the two rebels over carefully. I recognize the both of you, Meitarumi, one of the very few to ever possess two Kekii Genkai, and Ao, a man who managed to implant a working Byakugan. I glanced over to Sarutobi-sama who was remaining stoic, not even twitching at Inoki's announcement, before turning my gaze back to the pair. So, what exactly is it you are hoping for with this meeting, Terumi-san? Sarutobi-sama questioned with a raised eyebrow. Assistance, Terumi-san announced firmly. As we are right now, the rebels cannot attain victory against Yagura's loyalist faction. And what exactly would we get out of assisting you? Inoki questioned, an irritated frown on his face. Even if we don't agree with his actions, he still has yet to have done anything to our nations, and our daimyo will question our decision. Terumi-san swallowed tightly as she took in a careful breath. If we succeed in killing Yagura and take control of Kirigakure, we will be willing to sign a full alliance treaty with your nations and several high-level jutsu scrolls, she informed, her lips a thin line as Sarutobi-sama and Inoki looked at her impassively. We are also authorized by the daimyo to offer trade treaties as well as favored nation status with Mizu no Kuni. The two Kages shared a long look with one another, communicating through extremely subtle gestures that I only caught thanks to my long association with Sarutobi-sama. All in all, this could be highly valuable to our nations, namely Hai no Kuni and Tsuchi no Kuni. The question was, would it be worth the manpower? That is agreeable, Sarutobi-sama announced, Terumi-san sagging lightly in relief as Ao closed his visible eye briefly. For the time being we will be sending Yuriko-chan and Han-san to give us a more accurate summation of what will be needed. I didn't even twitch at his announcement, simply turned my eyes to Han-san for a brief moment before turning back to my leader for my orders. Just the two of them? Ao voiced, bringing my attention to him. Sure, she might be a halfway decent Irionin and he might be a decent taijutsu specialist, but we need strong shinobi, not your cast-off dash. I would advise you shut your mouth before you say something to ruin any chance of getting any assistance, Ao-san, I spoke up, cutting him off. Turning to him I gave him an obviously false smile. Or did the fact that I nearly killed more than half of the first iteration of your vaunted 7 swordsmen go over your head? Watch your tongue. Ao looked ready to speak again before I decided to nip it in the bud and flared my Sharingan to life and let out a surge of my intent to kill. In simple words, basically, I took all of those dark, furious emotions that I've experienced in my life, and focused them all onto Ao-san. And I've had a lot of experiences that have made me angry in the past. There was also the fact the user's chakra level had an effect on the pressure it created, and my gamer power quantifies my chakra points as 37,900, which is the most I have seen outside of Rashi and Han-san, who both had around 40,000 CP each thanks to their Jinchuriki status. When the pressure was presented to someone, it struggles against their chakra to affect them, and considering my most definitely dwarfed Ao-san's, it really wasn't surprising that he collapsed to his knees from the pressure my intent pressed onto him. I didn't earn an S ranking in the bingo book for my ability to heal my allies, I hissed at him dangerously, my base Sharingan eyes spinning furiously. I wasn't made the leader of my clan simply because I am able to heal them, the daimyo doesn't have me on his short list because I am a decent Irionin, Ao-san. I am the sword scalpel of Konohagakure, and during the Third War, I have killed many people, ask them if I am just a decent Irionin. I think he gets the point, Yuriko-chan, Sarutobi-sama announced, cutting my pressure short as he placed a hand on my shoulder. Of course, Sarutobi-sama, I replied, dismissing my Sharingan as I stepped back in line with Han-san. My apologies for my subordinate's careless words, Terumi-san said with a small bow to the two of us. He has a tendency to speak without thinking. I'm sorry for my overreaction, I replied, bowing politely to the rebel leader. My temper has a tendency to get the better of me from time to time. Sarutobi-sama let out an odd sound that sounded like he was trying to cover a laugh with some coughing as he looked away, covering his mouth with his hand as his shoulders shook a bit. Temper, getting the better of you? Never, Han-san quipped sarcastically, getting an elbow from me as he chuckled. Sarutobi-sama coughed, as he recovered his composure and looked at me carefully. Please send word when you arrive as to the rebel base and you have assessed what they need, he instructed me sternly, getting a nod in return as Inoki addressed Han-san. You have one job, ensure Yuriko survives, that Tsuchikage announced, getting a raised eyebrow from me, I could protect myself, thank you very much. If that brat Yagura learns of her presence, he may decide to go after her in person while in full bijou mode, well. I guess I would need some help with that. Sarutobi-sama, could you send word to Jiraiya-sama? I questioned him lowly. I may need his help if we need to reseal the Sanbai after Yagura is killed. I'll send word to him as soon as I return, he promised me with a small smile, patting my arm. Take care of yourself while you are in Mizu no Kuni, I expect you to return in one piece. I smiled at my leader confidently. Of course I will, Sarutobi-sama, I assured him. I'll be back before you know it and annoying you with my daily visits. The elderly leader chuckled in amusement as he nodded and stepped back. Right then, your updated mission begins now, you are to travel to Mizu no Kuni and assist the rebels with taking control of Kirigakure from the current Mizukage Yagura, he instructed professionally. Upon your arrival and assessment of the rebel base and forces we will send reinforcements depending on your report. Yes, Hokage-sama, I replied in a professional manner, saluting with Han-san. The two Kage nodded to us, allowing us to follow Terumi-san and Ao-san towards Mizu no Kuni. The journey was a rather quiet one. Our two guides were tense as we traveled, their eyes constantly darting around nervously at every little sound. They were apparently very nervous about getting ambushed by a group of loyalist faction hunter nin, which to be fair, would be a valid reason to be nervous. Especially since they did ambush us. My Kodachi blocked an incoming ninjato before my chakra scalpel enveloped hands slashed along his chest, severing several blood vessels from his heart, and left him to collapse to the ground, gasping for breath as he clutched at his chest. My Sharingan swept the area. Han-san was currently occupied with a pair of hunter nin, blasts of steam boiling their exposed skin every time he connected a fist on their body. Meanwhile Terumi-san was doing her best to dodge a number of water-based whips alongside Ao-san as a group of hunters tried to capture the two of them. Frowning a bit, I was tempted to break out my Susanoo and end the battle then and there, but I shook it off for the time being. It wouldn't do to be over-reliant on my eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. After all, it was only one aspect of my strength. Not to mention the god complex my eyes seemed to be trying to give me. 3 of the 8 hunter nin trying capture the pair were forced to break away from their quarry as I launched a great fireball at them and forcing them onto the ground as I completed a new set of seals. Fun fact. Having ownership of a Menenahoko granted me a natural earth affinity, one just as strong as my fire affinity, meaning, once I had it trained up, I was able to break out some very impressive earth ninjutsu. Earth release, earth flow wave. I announced as the earth before me began to rise up in a wave towards the 3 hunter nin who had just landed. The wave hadn't even completely impacted against them before my next set of seals was completed. Earth release, violent heavenly earth needle. The already muffled screams of the buried hunter nin were cut short as they were each stabbed by several large needles of dirt in their vital organs. You have killed 4 Kiri hunter nin, loyalist faction. Plus 4,000 EXP and 12,000 Ryo gained. 3. Standard issue ninjato. 25. High quality kunai. 15. Chakra conductive metal shuriken. Water release. Explosive water wave. Jutsu scroll looted and stored in inventory. I ignored the pop-up, only sparing it the briefest of glances before moving on to my next target as the hunters seemed to be completely focused on Terumi-san and Ao-san who were now able to begin to counter-attack with almost half of their attackers dealt with. I had to admit, when compared to my husband's, Terumi-san's lava release fell, rather short of impressing me. Don't get me wrong, she was impressive with her skill in using it, especially in combination with her boil release, but, then again, it isn't that surprising considering that my husband is capable of creating literal volcanoes with his stronger jutsus. The few missions we had been sent on together often resulted in a massive change in the region when it came to how the maps were drawn. Thankfully we haven't permanently made an active volcano, yet. The remaining hunter nin quickly fell under our combined attacks, soon leaving us as the only living people in the immediate area as I began to manipulate the earth to bury the bodies. Well, I suppose that was our official welcoming party, Han-san commented with a small chuckle. I smirked back at him as the bodies began to sink into the earth. Indeed, we should be sure to repay them for their kind welcome, I replied with a beatific smile. Is it just me, or are Konoha Irionin scarier than Kiri's? Ao-san questioned aloud, sounding like he was speaking more to himself than any of us. Ao-san, if you don't think any Irionin is scary, then I pity you, Han-san pointed out. They know the limits of the human body better than anyone else, and how to make it tick in any way they want. I turned and smiled at the Kiri shinobi at Han-san's words, making the man even more disturbed as Terumi-san giggled and Han-san chuckled in amusement. Thankfully, an entrance to our hidden base isn't too far from here, Terumi-san announced as she began to lead the way. I kept a watch with Ao-san, who was using his implanted Byakugan while I was using my Sharingan to scan for anyone watching us. Thankfully there were none, that we couldn't see anyways. The base itself was hidden under several high-level genjutsu and land-altering seals to keep them hidden along with a perpetual mist. Really, it made good use of the natural land and environment to keep it hidden from the loyalist forces with only a handful of entrances under heavy guard. Han-san and I definitely had the attention of nearly everyone in the camp, not just being foreign shinobi, but also the promise of help from TUF the other 4 great shinobi nations. Han-san, can you go with Ao-san and assess their available troops? I questioned the Gobi Jinchuriki who nodded in confirmation. I need to assess your hospital and Irionin, I informed Terumi-san as I turned to her. While we are doing that I would like to know more about the situation in Mizu no Kuni. Of course, this way please, Terumi-san confirmed as she turned to guide me to their improvised hospital, a very basic building that looks like it was erected using earth ninjutsu. Unfortunately, because of the fact we have to be ready to move our location if needed, our facilities are not the greatest. Understandable, I assured as we entered, my eyes scanning everything as Irionin didn't even look up as we entered as they bustled around, tending to the wounded and injured. Adequate for a forward operating base, going to request more medics, I noted, more to myself as I moved, my eyes darting left and right rapidly. Our inspection was cut short as more injured were brought in a severe hurry. Hachi's losing blood fast, one of the men shouted desperately. He's going to die soon. Several of the medics looked at one another, I knew what they were thinking, even just from looking, he has lost a lot of blood and from the looks of the wound, his heart had been damaged, for most in the medical profession, it was impossible to heal. But, I was not most. Bring him to an open operating room, I announced calmly, stepping forward, my hands snatching up a pair of surgical gloves as I moved. I pointed to a man who was marking things on a clipboard. Keep him alive while I'm prepping, I will be in shortly. They all turned to Terumi-san uncertainty. What are you waiting for, move. I barked out impatiently, as Naruto-kun and Sasuke-kun called it, clan head voice coming to the forefront, my Sharingan flashing to life. A man's dying here. Why yes, they stammered out as they quickly followed my orders, Terumi-san blinking in surprise at how quickly I took control of the situation. Impressive, she murmured, following as I moved to a sink to begin washing my arms free of any dirt, grime and some blood from our earlier battle. Wouldn't be the first time I had to deal with belligerent Irionin, I announced as I placed my kodachi on a nearby counter and pulled on one of the smocks most Irionin used for the operation. Sorry to cut this short, but I have an operation. Of course, Terumi-san allowed with a smile and nod as I entered an operating room. Sit rep, I commanded as I entered. He is on death door, the medic I assigned to keeping him alive informed me as he tried to clean up the injury enough for operating on. His heart is heavily damaged and bleeding a large amount, he can't be dash. He can, I announced in a calm tone as I stepped up to the table and placed a glowing hand on the patient's forehead. Do you know the blood circulation technique? I questioned, the man nodding quickly. Keep the blood circulating as best as you can, focus on his brain to keep it active and to prevent as much brain damage as possible. Alright, the medic stammered before he formed some hand seals and placed them on the man's head in place of my own, allowing me to focus solely on his primary injury. Get me a pig's heart. I shouted out of the room. I need to make some skin grafts. Right away, a shinobi shouted before scampering off. I need blood for this man. I shouted, quickly pulling his blood type from a medical scan as I began pulling away some damaged skin from the chest so that I could operate on the heart. Wind chakra was used to create the wound, I murmured, noting the damage that has been inflicted. Going to have to remove some parts for transplanting. I have the heart, the shinobi from earlier shouted, bringing what looked like a fresh pig's heart. You make yourself useful and clean it. I shouted to a nearby assistant who was staring wide-eyed as I operated. Yes. Ma'am, the young woman shouted rapidly before accepting the heart and set about cleaning it. I redirected the flow of blood from the damaged areas as I waited, the man had lost nearly 4 liters of blood, so that made it easier to redirect his blood at least as his labored breathing oxygenated his blood. Where is the blood? I shouted angrily. Here. Terumi-san announced calmly as she walked into the room clad in a healer's smock and her hair pulled into a severe ponytail, not a single hair in her face or threatening to fall out, several sacks of blood in her hand. The heart is ready, the assistant called out. Help Terumi-san with prepping the blood for transfer, I instructed as a cart with the heart on it was rolled next to me. I pulled one of my hands away from the opening in the man's chest as I used a sealless chakra scalpel to begin surgically cutting the pig's heart for the parts one needed, splitting my attention with circulating the blood away from the damaged sections. Do not start transferring most of the blood until I have repaired his heart. Understood, the medics chorused obediently. I blinked when a dry towel wiped away the sweat from my brow, sparing a brief glance to a new medic that joined the group before focusing once more on the man before me. Parts are ready for transplant, removing damaged sections now, I announced as I quickly cut out the damaged valve and skin, my new assistant taking the damaged parts for disposal from me before I began to graft the new parts onto his heart. It was close, very close, but once the new parts were in place I was able to start having the blood circulate normally again as the replacement blood was added, the man's pale complexion slowly returning to a more healthy shade. He is out of danger now, I announced, several cheers being heard from outside of the operating room as I began closing up his chest and healing the rest of his wounds. "Yuriko-sama, I can finish this," the medic I had initially commandeered informed. "If you can, there are more who need your help." "Very well," I allowed, stepping back to allow the man to take over the healing and turned to the woman who had ended up being my assistant. "Show me the most critically wounded." "Right this way, Yuriko-sama," the woman informed, leading the way back into the main area. "It may be a different country, there may be strangers, but..." I was in my element, and I think I just took over the hospital of the Kirigakure rebels. Oh well, probably won't be the last time I do such a thing. For now, I had people to save. "Long day, Yuriko-sama," Han-san questioned teasingly as I entered our assigned quarters, basically a larger than normal tent with actual beds rather than cots. Ever since my first surgery, which apparently spread through the camp like wildfire, the medics had begun to insistently call me Sama at all times, and it's been nearly 10 hours since that first surgery, with several more following it as I worked through the critically injured men and women of the rebellion. "Don't you start with that too," I told him sternly before letting out a sigh. "We definitely need medical supplies and a couple of medic squads." "How do their troops look?" "Not terribly, a lot of versatility with their assorted Kekkei Genkai users," Han-san informed with a shrug. "But, it's a lot of specialists and not enough regular troops, and they don't coordinate very well either." I heard a debrief where they ended up attacking each other rather than the enemy they were targeting. I let out a small groan of frustration as I began writing out my report to the Kages. "Right, so we need the whole shebang," I commented with a heavy sigh. "But, they got a decent infrastructure here, just needs some polishing." Han-san raised an eyebrow in response before shrugging it off. "Quite a bit of polish, but hey," he commented carelessly. "How we getting the report back?" "One of my summons," I announced with a playful grin, getting a raised eyebrow from him. "Oh. Managed to secure one for yourself?" he asked curiously. "Yeah, found at one of the training grounds we use to help Naruto-kun train with Kurama's chakra," I explained as I finished the report for our leaders. It was a rather short and to the point, but I wasn't really in the mood to flourish it up. They really needed to flourish it up for the daimyo. They knew how I wrote and could mimic my handwriting. I bit into my thumb and drew out a bit of blood before forming a set of seals. "Summoning technique," I announced as I pressed a hand to the ground, causing a plume of smoke to erupt from under my hand that quickly cleared away to reveal a falcon the size of a small child. "Hello, Soyakes," I greeted the messenger falcon with a smile. "Yuriko-sama," the falcon returned formally, bowing his head in deference. "You have a message for me to deliver?" "I do," I confirmed, holding out the scroll I wrote it out on. "Take this to Sarutobi-sama and wait for his reply, please." "Of course, Yuriko-sama," Soyakes assured, bowing again before taking the message in one of his talons. "I shall return post-haste. Be careful, we are in hostile territory and the enemy may try and bring you down to prevent messages from getting out," I warned the falcon with concerned look. "I thank you for your concern, Yuriko-sama, but I shall be fine," the falcon assured as he bowed a final time before walking out of the room. "I shall return tomorrow evening at the latest." "Very well, fly safe," I told the falcon before it took to the air with a mighty flap of his wings and angled himself towards Konohagakure and headed home. "Well, now that that's done, I'm crashing for the night," I announced to Han-san, who chuckled in amusement. "Night. See you in the morning," Han-san replied in amusement as he began to pull off his armor. I just simply flopped onto my assigned bed and quickly fell asleep, exhausted from the long hours of surgeries and directing Irionim. End chapter. Yuriko's stats name, Yuriko level, 75 EXP, 7, 547/37, 500 age, 20 gender, female title, Uchiha clan head, plus 50% to all reputation gains, command of the Uchiha clan, secondary title, equal to the clan killer, plus 50% to all stats, plus 200 HP and CP per level. Reputation with Konohagakure and Uchiha clan is set to Exalted. Stats, current, former HP, 9,125, CP, 37,900, STR, 95, 166, INT, 140, 210, DX, 160, 280, VIT, 90, 135, WS, 135, 202, LUK, 41, 61, 41, 61, Rio, 36,590,254 to 25,542,153. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.